this one?
Did I unplug the wrong one?
No, no. I think it's the right one. That's yours.
Yeah, but this is the one I unplugged. Oh no, this is yours. So, and you have an adapter?
Yes.
You know what we can also do?
Yep.
No, yeah, you'll need your adapter, but
Well, it doesn't matter.
you're good to go.
I did test it yesterday, so
Okay.
it should work.
Perfect. So I'll leave this for you, and I will get out of your way.
No, it's perfect. I think I'll match. Не, добре, съм просто тук е малко тясно. Test. Okay, guys, I think we are ready to start. Right, so can you hear me well enough? Because I cannot determine here out front. All right, so welcome everyone. My name is Konstantin. I'm part of the Chaos Group team, and I have been part of the team for the last 7 years or so now. And first, I started working for a company as a content creator, and then I started traveling around demonstrating the capabilities of our products. And recently I have switched, and now I'm product manager of V-Ray for SketchUp. So this is a really exciting presentation for me, because that's the first time that I have been actually working on the product, and I'll present what it's capable of. So this next presentation will be about V-Ray for SketchUp and V-Ray for Rhino. And I will be showing some of the things that Corey talked about and that he briefly introduced in the beginning. Okay, so you already saw that slide, but I want to say a few words about V-Ray. So basically our product is most famous in the architectural industry, and that's the reason why we have gathered here today. And like I'm proud to say that 92% of all the big architectural houses use our product, and that's not an accident. So basically the reason for that is the tools or the features that our product provides for visualizing interiors, exteriors easily and really quickly. Of course, you already know that the product is also used in other industries as well. So you will see it applied when people are working on product design, product visualizations, advertisement, automotive design, and of course game cinematics, for example, and film and visual effects. And our software development is always based on our users' demands, needs, and requests. But if you deal with so many different people, making everyone happy is always a big challenge because we get a lot of mixed requests. And for me personally, I come from a VFX background, so people like me, they like control, they like options, they're used to complexity, like the one you see over here. So something like that doesn't really bother them. So I have been using V-Ray for many years, and I never thought that this is complex. But it appears sometimes it is. Like that's too much to handle. And nowadays I can understand that and I can feel it. So basically those are that screenshot of V-Ray in 3ds Max, and those are the settings I use on a regular everyday basis. And of course I was fine with that, but when I started traveling the world and meeting different people, I heard a lot of requests. A lot of people wanted something more like that. So, and yeah, like that's the quick mock-up that I created for the perfect interface. But you have to keep in mind that it's not perfect because sometimes you have to direct what you create. So if we have a perfect simulating engine, a perfect simulator, a physical reality, that might not suffice because sometimes you want to have control over different aspects of your set. And keeping those two concepts in mind, we started working on the new versions of SketchUp and Rhino. And actually with those platforms, we had the chance to move forward in that direction. So everything that you'll see in today's presentation are our first steps in that direction. So it's not complete. It will get better in time, of course, according to your feedback. Okay, so let's go to and talk a little bit about SketchUp right now. So what we have achieved so far with the product is, in my opinion, something which is easy to learn and easy to use. At the same time, it still has the full tool set or the full palette of tools that you need for creating high-end visualizations quickly and efficiently. And of course, on top of that, our engine is pretty fast because it's V-Ray Core that's doing the heavy lifting in the back. Okay, and in this presentation, I will be using the latest version of V-Ray for SketchUp. So we actually released V-Ray 3 recently, but my decision afterwards was to release a bunch of updates as quickly as possible and base each one of those updates on feedback from the forums or from me talking to people using the software. And we already have two update versions released. Each one of them took us like 2 weeks to develop and to release, and I think we were pretty successful so far. And the version that I'll use is the second update, and you'll be able to see basically the latest things that we have going on. The short list that's visible on this slide is just a small portion of all the new things that we have added. So if you open up V-Ray 3 for the first time, you will see that it's a completely new software compared to V-Ray 2. So everything that I'll show you is basically new or relatively new and is important for me to include in the demo. Okay, so let's actually switch into SketchUp for a split second here, and I want to introduce you to the interface of V-Ray 3. There are a couple of places in which you can find our plugin. Of course, the menu and the V-Ray submenus are the first and most obvious one. Then we have the V-Ray toolbar, organized in a really nice way, so you have the ability to create different V-Ray specific geometries, light sources, and of course you can always render interactively, or you can render a final shot with the production engine. This V-Ray icon here is probably the most important one that you'll use most often. Once I click it, this will bring up the new UI of our software. And with this one, we had the goal to have something centralized. So users no longer have to go around the scene selecting different parts of the scene in order to edit them. They can see everything compressed and organized in one single panel. As an example, I can edit materials. I can create materials from a library that ships with SketchUp, and I'll talk more about that later on. You can manage all the lights in your set, geometries, and of course, at the end, the render settings. So let me load up a scene that will show the options in action. So let's say I'll use this one. Okay, and here I have a couple of screenshots of the UI. Probably the best part about this interface is that it has these fly-offs, the left and the right fly-off. Basically, one of them gives you the material library. The one on the right-hand side will give you access to the advanced options, and that's a really huge concept that we have. So most of the basic options of V-Ray, things that you use on a regular everyday basis, are located in the central panel of the new UI, and things which you'll use from time to time to optimize or for some more advanced effects are located on the right side. So the thing that I'll start with is demonstrating the different rendering modes that come with V-Ray, because that's the question I most often get. And so, of course, we can always start the rendering process from the V-Ray toolbar. Using production or interactive rendering mode. But now we can do exactly the same thing. If we go to the asset editor, you will see that we have this really neat shortcuts available. Underneath, with a couple of toggles, you can switch between all the different modes that can be initiated with our renderer. For example, if I want interactive rendering, I can click the toggle and start V-Ray RT. So actually it's funny because we no longer use the word V-Ray RT. I will just use it in my 3ds Max presentation. I'll be referring to V-Ray RT as in the interactive rendering mode here in SketchUp and in Rhino. So the cool thing about this one is it gives me the ability to interact with my set while V-Ray is rendering. So I can basically move the camera around and I can start changing materials or even the lighting. So let me select the light intensity tool, hover over a light source in my scene, and I can decrease its intensity to dim the lights of the house a little bit. So that's just an example of the interactivity you get. Another really cool thing with RT is that I can move the camera in my SketchUp scene, but I can also rotate the camera in the frame buffer using a couple of simple shortcuts without disturbing my view of the set. So you can basically focus on a specific part of the set, work on it, create materials, and then go back to your original view. So if I interrupt the rendering process, the toggles will become active again, and now let's say I want to use the GPU of my computer and start the CUDA rendering engine. So again, this is done with just the flip of a toggle. And I'll restart the process. This time I will be rendering a mobile card. If you want to see something more impressive, you should probably stop by the big computer over there on the left and test it out. It has a couple of GPUs in there. But even on a mobile card, the speed is still manageable. I have to mention that the CPU engine and the GPU engines are two different things that we develop separately. We are trying to support all the same materials, all the same lights, so you don't have to switch your setups based on your hardware. And we are still not there, so it's still not perfect. If you want to use the GPU solution, I would recommend that you use it from the very beginning. This way you'll see what you'll get at the end. So if there's a difference between CPU and GPU, you'll be well aware. Another option that I have for rendering, which is actually new in V-Ray 3, is if I disable interactive and leave the progressive toggle enabled and click render. This time, V-Ray will do a light cache pre-pass, so it will pre-calculate the global illumination, and then it will start rendering the final image. Again, similar to the interactive mode, we'll start with a noisy image, and the noise will get less and less visible as time goes on. So the progressive production mode is really useful if you don't want to wait for the very last bucket to appear on screen in order for you to save the image. You can basically start the engine, and at one point, if you like the image or if you like what you see, you can just interrupt the process, save the image on the hard drive, and work from there. So in case you're wondering how do you control the quality or how do you auto-save images with that engine, in fact, we have the quality slider that I was talking about underneath. So if I set the quality to low, basically V-Ray will render till it reaches a specific noise threshold, and then it will save the image on the hard drive. Another option, which is located in the advanced panel, is I can limit the time instead. So I can, if I have, let's say, 1 hour to render a full fly-through animation, I can just split that time in the number of frames and input that number over here. And this will make sure that V-Ray renders each frame for, let's say, 1 minute, saves it on the hard drive, and at the end of the day, I know I'll have the whole sequence rendered with the best possible quality. So the progressive renderer is pretty good in that regard. Still, if you want to use the bucket mode, you can just disable progressive. And now we will see the standard buckets appear on screen. Okay. Again, the bucket renderer has the slider, and to be honest, lately I don't even expand the advanced panels. The quick quality settings work pretty well in most cases. Still, if you want to do additional optimizations, you can tweak the different values in the ray trace section, or you can even expand or reveal some additional settings like different optimizations that are well suited for more advanced users. Okay. So yeah, those are a couple of examples of the quality control, and now we get to the V-Ray denoiser. So this was a feature requested by many people, and we in V-Ray 3.5 for 3ds Max we finally, or 3.4 I think it was, we finally sat down and we created the V-Ray denoiser. And the cool thing about this algorithm is that it lets you render noisy images and then it will denoise them, but it does it in a really smart way. Since V-Ray has access to or has the ability to split your image in different passes, like it can extract the textures, it can extract the lighting or the global illumination, we are taking advantage of that, and we are applying the denoiser effect only on the lighting or only on the global illumination, the layers of your image which actually need denoising. If you have textures which are like noise textures or textures with really fine details, V-Ray will see them in the corresponding render element and it will keep the details in there. So it's much better to apply the V-Ray denoiser instead of doing the denoising process in 3ds Max, for example, or like in Photoshop, for example. So here you can see a really basic workflow. The denoiser is created like a render element. You don't have to worry about the options. You have a couple of presets. And then you just, I just rendered my image using the low quality option. Once the image is done, V-Ray will create an additional render element, which is the denoised image result. And it does it for a split second, so it doesn't cost you anything. You can always render low or medium quality, and that's a common workflow that we apply lately, and then just denoise the image afterwards and save it. Of course, if you have the computing power, why even denoise the images? You can just use all the computers in your render farm to render a perfect image using the very high quality, for example. And that's where the V-Ray Swarm comes into play. Corey and Brian already showed you that and said a few words about it. In my eyes, this is a great management tool. So back in the day, in the office, we had a big render farm, but we were always struggling with setting up the render farm, making sure that it works, and that we can split the resources in between different people. Now, thanks to the Swarm engine, it happens automatically. And the best part is that the Swarm will not only distribute the rendering jobs, it will also make sure that you have the same V-Ray build or the same V-Ray version installed on all the Swarm nodes. Previously, I was always running into problems like having different V-Ray builds on different computers, which was producing different colored buckets or some differences in the rendered image. Now with Swarm, we will never experience that. Once I click the render button, Swarm will send the V-Ray build which is appropriate to all the render nodes. It will install it silently, and it will start rendering with the correct thing. So here it is. I did start it in the office, since I cannot show it with no render nodes. So basically, you flip the toggle. You have to install Swarm on the other computers, and you should be able to see something like that. There's a slider that lets you release some of the computers, which is really cool, because if a colleague comes and he needs the other machines like quickly, I can just release some of them in the middle of the rendering process and not interrupt my rendering job easily. And while this is going on, I can basically view the processors that are participating in the rendering job, and I can manage them through a web-based interface. Okay, so now we get to geometry management. V-Ray is famous for being able to render huge amounts of geometry, and that's thanks to a couple of reasons. The first one is, of course, V-Ray supports instances. It works really well with instance geometries. In SketchUp, you can just create components and instance them around, and they'll be rendered in the most optimized way possible. In Rhino, you should create block instances and do exactly the same thing. On top of that, we have added the V-Ray proxy, which is a great tool to manage heavy things like this example over here. So let me zoom in a little bit. This is a geometry that I had in 3ds Max, and you can see that this tree is made out of 5 million polygons, approximately. So even if I try to bring that in SketchUp, it will be impossible because SketchUp will just not import that geometry. I still wanted to render it, and that's why I exported the geometry as a V-Ray proxy from 3ds Max. And since we have unified proxy loaders, I can just load it in SketchUp and render it easily. And in a second, I'll show you this tree rendered and instanced multiple times across a scene. Actually, let's go back to SketchUp and load another example.